Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are going to completely reframe the psychology behind one of modern television's absolute most iconic characters. Whether you've watched his journey a dozen times or honestly, even if you just know him by reputation, John Locke from the show Lost is a deeply fascinating case study in human psychology. But we're not just looking at a fictional character today. We are looking at the intensely relatable and frankly often dangerous lengths the human mind will go to just to find meaning. So let's dive right into this. Now, there's this massive pop culture myth that almost everyone just blindly accepts. John Locke was the man of faith, right? I mean, it's the label he was given, it's the archetype he fulfilled, and it's basically the simple summary of his entire existence on the show. When people talk about Locke, they always bring up his unwavering belief in the island, his deep spiritual connection to his surroundings, and his absolute rock-solid certainty that everything happens for a reason. But if you look closely at the source material, that simple label, it's actually a mask. And here is the fundamental shift in perspective. He didn't just believe, he needed it to mean something. This is the paradigm shift we're exploring today, guys. Locke's faith wasn't born out of some profound sense of peace or inner zen. Not at all. It was born out of a desperate, overwhelming need. It was literally a survival mechanism. He wasn't a man resting confidently in his faith. He was a guy clinging to it for dear life because the alternative was entirely too devastating to even look at. Section 1. Saved from Despair. To really understand this psychological deconstruction, we have to look backward to where it all started. Just look at the sheer, crushing weight of his pre-island trauma. Ignored by the people who should have loved him most, manipulated in the cruelest, most deeply personal ways you can imagine, constantly rejected by the world around him, and ultimately, left physically broken. Locke wasn't just a guy who had a bad run of luck. Actually, scratch that. His entire life was a masterclass in suffering and humiliation. He was a man stripped of his agency, living day in and day out with this agonizing sense of powerlessness. You absolutely have to grasp this immense vulnerability to understand what happens next. And then, boom, the crash happens. The impossible occurs. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he can walk again. It is a miraculous, jarring pivot from a life of constant, agonizing pain. One minute, he is defined entirely by his physical limitations and his trauma, and the next, he's miraculously whole. It's honestly hard to overstate the psychological shock of a moment like this. Just imagine every limitation you've ever had suddenly evaporating without any explanation whatsoever. But the crucial takeaway here isn't just the physical healing. This is the very first moment in his entire life that feels spiritually significant. This moment isn't really about his legs working again. It's about being rescued from total spiritual despair. For the first time ever, Locke feels seen by the universe. He feels like a key participant in some grand design, rather than just a punching bag for a cruel world. The healing is physical, sure, but the true salvation, that is entirely psychological. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the terrifying alternative he faces if he ever lets go of the island's magic. Think about it. If the island isn't special, if he wasn't chosen, then he has to face this horrifying thought. Maybe his suffering meant nothing. All those years of pain, the manipulation, the brokenness, it was just random, senseless cruelty. For Locke, that thought is unbearable. There's no way he can accept that. He becomes a man of faith, because finding meaning in his circumstances is literally the only thing saving him from absolute despair. And this brilliantly illustrates why Locke's path is fundamentally, dangerously different from everyone else's. Most of the survivors, they're driven by basic human needs: survival, figuring out an escape plan, or just, getting some answers about where the heck they are. But Locke wants purpose. While everyone else is scrambling to figure out how to get back to their normal lives, Locke is desperately trying to prove that his life finally has value. This makes him incredibly compelling to watch, but as we'll see, it also makes him incredibly dangerous. Section 2. The burden of being chosen. Let's look at how this innocent search for purpose morphs into a really dangerous coping mechanism. Here is the crucial detail so many people miss. Locke doesn't just follow the island or appreciate it. He builds his entire self-worth around it. The island becomes his identity. The boundary between who John Locke is and what the island represents, it completely dissolves. He is no longer the broken man from his past. He is the chosen one of the island. And the problem is, when your entire identity is tied up in an external concept like that, you become incredibly fragile. Because of that fragile identity, Any doubt from others is no longer just a friendly disagreement about the facts. Oh no. He perceives doubt as a direct personal attack. If you question the island, you are questioning Locke's very reason for existing. As a result, he becomes incredibly stubborn, highly reactive, and deeply obsessive. He isn't defending truth or logic anymore. He is viciously defending the very thing that is keeping him emotionally alive. If he loses the argument, he loses himself. Section 3, Jack versus Locke. Now we get to the real conflict. Now, this isn't just your standard battle of science versus faith. It's a profound clash of fundamental psychological survival strategies. Just look at Jack's worldview. Reality must make sense before I trust it. He needs evidence, logic, and order to feel safe. Now look at Locke's. I need to trust something so reality feels meaningful. Locke demands that reality have a grand design, because without it, his past pain absolutely destroys him. Both men are just trying to survive psychologically, but man, they are pulling in completely opposite directions. And here is the truly tragic reality of Locke's specific strategy. He keeps waiting for that final, glorious moment where the island explicitly validates him, where it finally says, yes, John, you were right about everything. But that validation never fully arrives, and as the silence stretches on, his faith stops being a source of strength and morphs into this toxic dependence. He chases that feeling of being chosen like an addiction, and the harder he chases it, well, the more unstable and unpredictable he becomes. Section 4, the real-world lesson, because this is really about chasing relief. So here is a profound universal truth for us. People love to talk about the noble pursuit of chasing purpose. It sounds great, right? But the reality is, much like Locke, a lot of people aren't actually chasing purpose at all. They are chasing relief from feeling insignificant. They're running away from the terrifying thought that they might be invisible or that their struggles don't actually matter. Understanding the difference between seeking a healthy purpose and desperately fleeing insignificance, that is key to understanding so much of human behavior. And when you tie your entire identity to that desperate feeling of needing to be chosen, you open yourself up to incredible danger. We're talking manipulation, obsession, and self-destruction. If your self-worth relies entirely on a system, a leader, or an ideology telling you that you are special, you will do almost anything to maintain that status. You'll ignore glaring red flags, you'll alienate the people who actually care about you, and you'll march right off a cliff. Locke fell into every single one of these traps because he just couldn't let go of the need to be chosen. And listen, these aren't just character flaws in a TV show. These are very real-world dangers we see in society all the time. When people are desperate for relief from insignificance, they easily fall into unhealthy ideologies. They offer blind loyalty to leaders who make them feel seen. They develop deep emotional dependencies on systems, political movements, or groups that promise them they matter. Locke's story is a massive warning sign about what happens when our need for meaning completely overrides our critical thinking. Ultimately, when we look back at this character, we see a really sad truth. John Locke wasn't a weak man. He wasn't a fool. Far from it. He was something much more tragic. He was a man who needed life to mean something so badly, he completely stopped questioning what he was giving himself to. He was desperately trying to outrun his own insignificance, and in doing so, he surrendered his autonomy entirely. Beneath all the mystery, the crazy mythology, and the dramatic conflicts, Locke's entire character arc really boils down to one haunting, deeply human fear. What if my suffering had no purpose? It's a question we all grapple with at some point in our lives when faced with adversity. So ask yourself, how far would you go and what would you believe to avoid the silence of that question? Think about that the next time you find yourself aggressively defending an idea or searching for meaning in the chaos. Thanks for joining me on this explainer and keep questioning what you see.